now, and I will also be sharing on Facebook Live. Hi, Katie, thanks for joining us. If you can see the poll up, go ahead and take a few seconds to answer that, and then we will get started shortly. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get started. So my name is Kristen Kane. I am the project director for Hui o Ko'olau Poko. And this is the first of our education and outreach series. We're gonna be hosting these little webinars on the second Saturday of every month for the next year. So for the next few months, we have one of our lovely board members, Jenna Masters, who is on this call as well, who has coordinated a propagation series for us. So we'll be hitting a bunch of different topics over the next few months, and then we'll wrap that up with an outplanting demo as well. And then we'll move into spotlighting some of our staff members and our project sites. So thank you guys for taking time out of your day to join us. Just a few little housekeeping things before we go along. I'm going to kind of try to play back of the house with the Zoom meeting and be a moderator. Jenna and Tim will be our presenters today for the most part. This is a recorded Zoom. It will be posted onto our YouTube page. It's also cross-posting live to Facebook right now. And then we're going to have an extended version of the videos that you'll see today posted onto our YouTube channel as well. We did cut down the videos that Tim was able to film for us a little bit just to fit within the time frame for today. So if you're interested in kind of learning a little bit more in depth or seeing those extended versions, they will also be posted to our YouTube channel by the end of next week. So just for a quick background, for those of you who aren't familiar with Hui o Ko'olau Poko, we are a Ko'olau Poko Kailua-based nonprofit organization that was founded in 2007. Our mission is protecting ocean health by restoring the Aina Mauka to Makai. And we do a variety of different project types. For the most part, we work on ecosystem restoration projects around stream systems, but we also focus on low impact development work as well. And that's mitigating stormwater runoff, whether it's from parking lots or from residential roofs. We work with homeowners and large landowners to capture stormwater and infiltrate that water into the ground, giving the water a chance to seep into the ground, refill our aquifers, but also keeping pollutants out of our stream systems and ultimately into the ocean. We've got a few major projects in the Kailua Kaneohe area right now, and one of our largest restoration projects is at He'ia State Park, working on mangrove removal and ecosystem restoration there for o'opu in the stream, and also nesting habitat for the native marsh birds. So we are just starting to open up to a few volunteers each week. So if you're interested, check out our calendar on our website. That also has all of the upcoming education webinar series listed as well. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce Jenna Masters. Wave, Jenna. So Jenna is a board member for Huio'olapoco. She was born and raised in Kailua and received her undergrad degree in environmental studies with an emphasis on invasive species from the University of Hawaii at Manoa. And after several years as a natural resource management tech, she wanted to play a more significant role in shaping organization structures. And she decided to get her master's in public administration with a focus on nonprofit management. So she's currently Natural Area Reserve Specialist with the Division of Forestry and Wildlife under the Department of Land and Natural Resources. Thanks, Jenna, for setting up these awesome webinars. And then we've also got today, our guest propagator is Tim. Tim is the Propagule Management Specialist and Seed Bank Manager at the U.S. Army Natural Resources Program on Oahu. Hi, Tim. So Tim holds a bachelor's degree in botany and a master's in ethnobotany, and he spent most of his career collecting, propagating, and storing wild seeds for the development of native plant materials for restoration and conservation. First in New York City, then in the Midwest, and now Oahu. You're just moving your way along. I hope you stay here in Hawaii with us and don't keep going like to Japan or something. Stay in Hawaii with us. So Tim sees seeds as a critical natural resource, one that must be carefully managed if it's to be successfully used to restore our degraded natural spaces. So I am going to turn over our maybe next little bit of intro to Jenna while I queue up our first video for the day. All right, Jenna, you can unmute and give us a little video intro.
Great, can you guys hear me? Yeah? Okay, perfect. Well, thanks for having me, and I'm super glad everybody can make it. And so what we have today is a series of short videos between 4 and 7 minutes. So we're gonna end up playing a video, and then we're gonna pause for about 4 to 5 minutes for questions about each video. So feel free. We've got Tim on the line here, and he is an expert in this field. So if you guys have any questions at all, I'm gonna be monitoring the chat as well. So once the video is complete, we're just gonna pause. I will look at the video chat here, see if there's any questions. And if there is questions, we'll answer those. And if not, we'll move on to the next video. So our first video of the day is gonna be an introduction to the seed lab. So Tim, did you wanna give a mini spiel, or should we let the video speak for itself?
Let's let the video speak for itself, and if there are any questions, we'll answer them in the question session.
Okay, great. So with the video, the first video is a little bit loud initially for the first 2 minutes, just because they were filming inside of the seed lab. So if your computer speakers are on full blast, you might want to turn it down just for the first couple of minutes, and then you'll be able to come back in. So thanks, everybody. Looks like we're ready.
All right, here we go.
Oh.
I don't know if we have any sound on this, Nalani.
It seems not.
Nalani, can you hear us?
Okay, it sounds like maybe there was no sound for that. Jenna, can you unmute and confirm?
Yes, the sound was not on the video.
Sorry, okay, let me try this one more time, you guys. My apologies. I'm going to screen share.
Yes, bear with us. It's our first webinar Zoom educational series, so quite an undertaking. So
I promise it worked yesterday. We did a run through. There we go. Okay, I did not click a button, so gonna go again. Here we go.
Hi everybody, I'm Kapua Cavello, the Natural Resources Program Manager with the Army's Conservation Program here on Oahu. And I just want to give you a little background about the Seed Lab as far as its purpose and function within our larger Natural Resources Program here. So as you know, the Army trains and operates on Oahu and has different ways that they could potentially impact listed species that include fire and spreading weeds or other invasive species. So our program does a lot of work to offset any potential harm done from training by bettering the situation for endangered species that are present on Army lands. So the Seed Lab, in essence, is sort of like the Army's insurance policy for any unfortunate event that might occur as a result of training. So luckily, many of the endangered species that occur on Army land, there are over 80 endangered plants that we work with. The Seed Lab functions as a way to back those up, to use propagules for restoration of those endangered species to the forests, but also to restore native habitat to support populations of those same plants and animals that we're working with in our program. So that's kind of just the basic framework of the lab in the context of our larger program, and of course. You can always find out more about our program by contacting us or volunteering. But just a few interesting tidbits about the lab. We are the only seed lab within the Department of Defense that we know of. So that's kind of a cool, factoid. We also, the facility, I think Tim will talk about it, but it is actually backed up by a generator and is monitored through remote monitoring systems. So if there's a catastrophic weather event or some other failure of electrical failure, we have fail-safe safeguards to back up the important collections that we have. There are, I think the latest count was about 12 million seeds in the lab, so that's a lot of seeds that Makanani and Tim are processing and maintaining. And I think that's all I need to say. So enjoy your hands-on workshop with Tim.
So we just want to give you an overview of this lab and some of the cool stuff we do and what we have here to basically store some of our most endangered species so that we can keep those seeds alive through time and use them for reintroduction and stabilization through time. So here in the main room is really just our office/processing area. All seed collections that come in are here logged in. All the field data that we capture with those collections is logged here and then eventually databased, so we have that information in the future. And we use the space for weighing seed, cleaning seed, and experimenting with different processes and all of that. But the good stuff is really happening here over in the other room, and so why don't you follow me over this way and we'll check it out. So this is kind of what we call the equipment room because it hosts holds most of our equipment that we utilize for seed banking. And just to point out, it's a little bit discombobulated at the moment. That's because we're getting some new equipment that needs to be tested, and then we have to kind of reorganize the space. But I just wanted to point out a few important aspects of our seed bank. We have seed dryers we use here. And here are some of our newer versions of seed dryer, a little bit larger, a little bit more technologically advanced, but we're working right now to test them to make sure they can maintain the conditions we require for seed banking. Then of course, the next good piece of equipment for seed banking are refrigerators and freezers, and mostly we're just using household fridges and freezers, and we are storing seed at 5 degrees centigrade and at negative 18 degrees centigrade. So we have frozen storage and cool storage. And here we can see all the collections and how we have them stored. So all the collections are stored in foil packets. They're hermetic, so once they're sealed, there's no air in and no air out. So they are not exchanging gases with the outside environment. And we have all sorts of these freezers and fridges where we're stacking seed in and organizing seed for storage. Other pieces of equipment that are, I think, essential to our seed banking are growth chambers or germination chambers that we use to test the seed. So we want to test the seed when they come into the lab, so when that seed is fresh, and then we want to test that seed after we dry it and store it for a period of time. Especially if collections are stored for really long periods of time, we want to test that seed at intervals during that period to see if that seed is still alive or viable. So we understand that our storage protocols are working, and that the seed that we are saying is in our fridge is truly alive and germinating. So if we look in here, we have a couple of germination chambers where temperature is controlled and light is available, and here's where we're so once these seeds germinate, we are then going to, in most cases, transfer them into pots so we can grow those out, and those plants can be utilized for outplanting in the wild. So here's another piece of equipment. It is a growth chamber. Let's say a little bit more light in here, but also we can set it to variable temperatures and light cycles for day and night. And here we can see some of the plants there. So our primary focus is to preserve our seeds of our rare species, and so that's our primary focus in the seed lab. However, as ecological restoration becomes more of an important component of our program, we are working with more common species, and so we are storing those as well. But by far, the vast number of collections that we have represent those rare and endangered species that we are managing.
Hi, everybody. So did that come out good for everyone? Was it looking pretty good? I don't see a lot. Okay, great. So if you guys have any questions, this would be a great time to put in the chat box, as well as if you guys had any questions throughout the whole video, feel free to put things in the chat box anytime. We don't have too much going on there right now, so I'm going to give Tim an opportunity to speak a little bit more about the seed lab, or if he wants to add any additional tidbits, information.
Oh, well, I think that pretty much covered it. I think Kapua mentioned in her little segment, there's about 12 million seeds. So seeds in the seed bank, there are probably somewhere between 12 and 14 million seeds, but that is constantly in flux because we are constantly bringing in new collections, and we are also utilizing collections at the same time, but that's about right. So we maintain a heck of a lot of seed, but that seed can be stored for most of the species for greater than 20 years. And for some of these things, because we're testing them in real time, these seeds we might find are going to store for hundreds of years. So that's just kind of a waiting game. We can estimate those longevities. However, we can't really know unless we test it. So yeah, a lot of the seed that is in our seed bank is alive. And we also have a system in our database that allows us to kind of set recollection intervals. So as we're testing, we might find that species X stores for 20 years, and we have to wait for our next text to see if it will store for 25 or 30. Those collections expire in our seed bank, which triggers us to go get more seed, so that we're constantly keeping a viable seed in storage for about 39 taxa, in specifically for the Army's purposes of management. That's about it.
Awesome. Thank you, Tim. Okay, well, with that, we're going to keep it rolling here and move into our second video, which is going to be talking about different fruit types. So we'll see. Nalani, feel free to cue it up if you've got it.
Hey, welcome back, guys. So I'd like to use this time to just discuss fruits and fruit types and why it's important that we understand the various different processes is important, first and foremost, so that you can see what you're working with, right? And if you can see those physical seeds, you can count those physical seeds, you can manipulate those physical seeds, whether you have to scarify them in some sort of way, like by sandpapering our willy-willy, or our koa seeds, or clipping those seeds. A processed seed allows us to handle those seeds very easily. And then if you're in a place like the seed bank, we need to process our seeds so we know exactly how many seed we have. And then that's a smaller volume of material that we can more efficiently store. When we're working with fleshy fruits, it's important to process them because some fruits will actually provide chemicals that inhibit germination of those seeds. And also, if you let the seeds sit in a fruit, eventually that fruit will rot. And when it rots, it invites all sorts of things like bacteria, molds, and all those things can affect and greatly affect the quality or the viability of the seed you're working with. So how do we process seeds? There are certain things that I think are important. One, we can process seeds by hand, one by one, right? Simple. If we look at our alpaca seed, I can simply remove the fruit from the seed. And that's one way to begin. This is actually, I believe, two-seeded, so we'd actually have to remove the spongy material and then split the two in half. Or we can use something like a dental pick or a dissecting pick. And when we look at something like the butylon, we can actually physically remove those seeds by simply flicking them out of the structures, right? Working with larger amounts of material, we have to kind of use some tools to help us along the way. So, just want to point out a few things. Soil sieves are a great tool for processing seed because they have mesh sizes that are very variable in size. So that when we begin processing seed, we can separate the seeds from other size materials through using a soil sieve. We also use the stair tread material a lot, right? This is stair tread. You might put it on your wooden steps outside on your patio or something like that to keep you from slipping when it rains. So it is sometimes available at Home Depot, although every time I go to Home Depot or Lowe's to find the stuff, they happen to be out of it. But it can be easily ordered online from usaflooring.com or any number of sources. But this is a great material that helps us kind of break the seed off from the chaff. So separate the seed from different portions of the fruiting bodies, or macerate fruits, right? So, kind of removing the pulp from fleshy, wet fruits, right? And we can do that also, sorry, Makanani, I'm gonna come behind you, with a blender, right? And we don't have it situated right now because we have to buy more of it, but a blender can be very useful when macerating fruits or separating pulps and fleshy fruits from the seed. Although you gotta be considerate of using this tool. One, the metal blades will very likely damage your seed, so that has to be covered. And if you go and use the tool handle dip, it's like a plastifying material that usually comes in small container or paint-like containers. And you can remove the blade from your blender and dip all the metal portions in that plastic material, let it dry, and then you can safely macerate your fruits within there. But you still have to play with kind of the setting of the blending, because just the velocity of the blender whipping seeds against the glass side can also be destructive. So you have to kind of play with it. You have to kind of figure out what the tolerances of your seed are. And once you have that locked in, you can safely clean your fruit in this mechanism. So, why is stair tread important? Well, it's really easy. Right here we have some fruit that we showed in an earlier segment of Comprosma longifolia, Pilo. And pretty simply, we can just put that seed on there. use our mallet. However, I want to just explain the use of the mallet can also be destructive because we're adding a certain amount of pressure, and quite a bit of pressure. So you have to be careful and you have to play around with this mechanism a little bit. In some cases, you might not want to use the mallet because if those seed coats are fragile, you know, just the weight and the pressure of the mallet may break those seeds. And so again, you have to kind of test a small sample of your seed when using this mechanism to understand the seed's tolerances, so you know if you should actually not use the mallet and use your hand to rub things, or to use the mallet. But we've tested this, we know the mallet's good. Pilo, here we go. And we can macerate all those fruits very simply. We've now separated a pretty decent collection of seed from its fruiting material. So there we go. We can see the remainder pulp here and the seeds here. So we've successfully separated our seed from the pulp. And then, so moving on, we're going to use stair tread for another thing. And so here we do, again, we have our pseudonaphilium sandwichiensium, and we can strip our composite flower heads into the stair tread, like such. Maybe a little bit more. And then, because I'm not really sure of the tolerance of the seed, I'm not going to use the mallet, but I'm just going to use my hand. And if you want to get a little bit more friction, go put a latex glove on, or a rubber glove, like a rubber surgical glove. You get a little bit more friction there. And we can rub those heads across this material. And what's going to happen, those tiny little seeds are going to fall in the grooves of the stair tread. And then from here we can use multiple things to clean this, but using basic tools of using screen sizes or soil sieves. And we'd have to select a size that I think matches the seed size that we have. And this is going to be really hard to see, but I'm just going to try it. We picked a very small mesh size, and before, you probably couldn't see it on the camera, but I could. Very small seeds at the bottom of that tray. We can now pass that material through the sieve like that. Drop the remaining material into the thing. And then investigate if we have seeds. And I can see them, and I don't know if our zoom will, but all those black flecks right there are small, tiny little achenes of pseudonaphilium. So those are a few easy ways to approach this processing. Again, processing, one, is important for fleshy fruits, definitely. And after collecting fleshy fruits, I would, as soon as possible, begin to clean those fruits, because as those fruits rot and mold and so forth, you're going to lose viability of your collection and lose potential to propagate your seed. But
All right. So we actually jumped a little further to seed processing, and we missed seed types. But that's okay, because we can always backtrack to go into the different types of fruits. Did anybody have any questions about this segment? I'm just going to check in with Sana, who I think is also monitoring the Facebook Live. So let us know, Sana, if there's any questions on that end either. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Tim for a couple seconds and maybe just talk a little bit more about the importance of processing.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think processing from an outfit like ours is super important, because we're very concerned about the quality of all our collections going into storage. And so processing really just allows us to see what we have, especially when we're talking about dry fruits. But then again, I just want to reiterate the importance of, if you're letting your fleshy fruits dry, the seeds dry in their fruits, or mold in those fruits, that's a sure way to kill seed. And so it just, you got to highlight that those things are important. And there's some tolerance there. If you keep your fruits in the fridge, you might be able to store them safely for, you know, 4 or 5 days, but really eventually those fruits are going to begin to inhibit germination in your seed. So it's important to get them out of there. But otherwise, it's always great just to see what you're working with, you know. And in some cases, in many cases, we go out in the field, we collect seed, and we're not even sure what that seed structure looks like. And so the process of processing is really important just to help us understand better the seeds we're working with, what they look like, all these great things. So there are opportunities to kind of engage with those plants and understand better what you're dealing with. So.
Awesome. And with that, we're going to roll back into a little bit more about fruit types. So cue us up, Milani.
Welcome back, guys. So I'd like to use this time to just discuss fruits and fruit types and why it's important that we understand the various different kinds of fruit types when it comes to either conserving seed or propagating native seed for use in our garden or restorations or whatever it is. So there are a couple of concepts I want you guys to hold on to, and one is I want you guys to understand both wet and dry fruits, right? But then I also want to talk about the variety of fruit types there are and talk about things like dehiscent fruits. When we're talking about dry fruits, dehiscent fruits versus non-dehiscent fruits. So dehiscent fruits are fruits that dry and then open to eject their seeds. Whereas non-dehiscent fruits don't do that. They may be dry, however, they are not a type of fruit that is made to open and either drop their seed or actually physically eject it as those structures open up. So let's just look at some things. Let's start with dry versus wet fruits. And we're going to zoom into a few things here. On the table, we have a bunch of examples. If we look here in this tray, this is definitely a wet fruit. And this is Pilo or Camprasma longifolia. And if we look here, you can see the juices ooze out of that. Wet fruits. Wet fruits are apples, cherries, Pilo. Ule, which is Osteomales anthridifolia. And we can see here these white fruits that are also very squishy and wet. And the reason I'm pointing this out is because when we approach processing different fruits, we're going to approach dry and wet fruits very differently. So let's hone in on some of the other dry fruits here. Here, let's look at over here. This is Ohia, Metrosideros polymorpha. And here we have a dry fruit for sure. And inside this structure are many little seeds. And then here we have hibiscus arenatianus, the white flowering hibiscus, and the Hawaiian name, Makanani, because I just forgot it.
Kokio ke'o.
Kokio ke'o. Also, again, dehiscent fruit, dry, that's opening up. But not everything is a dry dehiscent fruit, so just want to look at cow here. Here, this is a dry fruit that is actually buoyant, so helps it travel through waterways as it is dispersed into different areas. And then this here is Pseudonaphilium sandwichensium, which is puheu. And this is in the Asteraceae family, so it's in the sunflower family. And it's a dry fruit, and what we're looking at is heads or composite flowers that now are fruits. And each individual fruit is actually called an achene and very difficult to see. They're the black flecks sitting down on the bottom of the tray. Fruits are very variable across plant families, and they develop from either multiple flowers, single ovaries, compound ovaries. They develop from different portions of the flower, and that kind of what defines them. So just to kind of give you an idea of more of a scientific analysis of the fruits, we can look at Willy Willy over here. This is a beautiful example. And, you know, commonly people are going to say, hey, Willy Willy pods. And that's good enough. That is a fruit type in itself, but it is kind of a colloquial term. But when we want to define this fruit kind of more scientifically, we're going to call it a legume, right? And interesting because Willy Willy is in the legume family or the pea family. But this legume are these pods that split open such. And other things that have legumes are like peas. So there we have a legume. Then we have berries, and a lot of people commonly think of a berry like a raspberry or a strawberry. But in fact, true berries from their scientific definition or their definition from where those fruits actually develop on the plant are derived from a single carpel, and they are usually a fleshy, multi-seeded fruit, whereas raspberries are actually a very different kind of fruit that we call aggregate fruits, but we commonly refer to them as berries. So that's pilo, that's a berry. Then we have another kind of fruit type which is pretty common, which is a drupe. So a drupe, a good example of a drupe is a plum or a cherry. And our drupes in some of our native flora, like naupaka here, or beach naupaka, that is a drupe here. It's a fleshy fruit. But one more, just to give you context, let's refer back to the pseudonaphalium, sandwichentium. This again is in the sunflower family, and if you all choose sunflowers, that fruit is considered an achene, right? So at the end of each little chunk of hair that holds the seeds, or the pappus that allows that seed to blow through the wind, is a small single seeded fruit called an achene, much like that of a sunflower. So remember two concepts here. We want to remember wet versus dry fruits, because when we approach processing, we're going to use very different techniques depending on what kind of fruit it is. And then why else are understanding fruits important? Well, if we understand this is a dehiscent fruit, it definitely helps us when we're out in the field, because if those seeds are being ejected from their capsules, we kind of have to understand if they're dehiscent, because sometimes we'll be out there collecting empty fruits because those seeds have already been ejected into the landscape. So understanding fruit types and what they are can help us in the field during collection. They can help us make decisions in the lab when processing, so that we can move forward with propagation of native plants.
Okay, so we got a little bit here on fruit types and a little bit about seed processing. You know what? I think with no questions here, I'm going to roll right on into seed dormancy, which I'm sure we'll have a little bit more to talk about after that. So let's see if Nalani is ready. Are we ready for seed dormancy? Oh, well, we're in a little bit of a break. So Tim, did you want to take any time to follow up on seed types and seed processing?
Not so much. I mean, sure. Understanding what you're working with goes a long ways to be efficient about what you're doing, whether it's processing or collecting or so forth. So I think better understanding you're working with, the fruit types, where they develop from. I mean, are you going to be in the field? Do you want to collect it a little bit earlier than maybe natural dispersal? Because at that point, with some dry fruits, especially those that dehyst, those seeds may no longer be available. And for processing is kind of like kind of art science, right? There's no one way you have to do it. And so there's all sorts of ways people have come up with interesting designs for winnowing seeds of dry fruits, or coming up and using household equipments like vacuum cleaners and soil sieves to process seeds. So there's a whole world of exploration in seed processing. What we showed in the video were just some ways that we approach seed collections because we want to maximize our efficiency in processing. So when we have common native species, well, I'm going to let it go. Here we come.
So what is seed dormancy? Well, seed dormancy is what happens when we take a seed and we give it everything it needs: moisture, soil, medium, light, gases, and so forth, and they still do not germinate. Those seeds do not germinate. So this dormancy is like a life history strategy that stops those seeds from germinating in unfavorable conditions or just prior to unfavorable conditions. And so what does that mean? Well, if you consider maybe the temperate example, so that example of the mainland where we have a solid winter, fall, spring, and summer, if you consider a plant like maybe something in the Asteraceae or sunflower family, that seed drops in the fall, and if that seed falls to the forest floor and germinates and winter comes, there's not a lot of time for that seedling to grow to a certain size, amass enough energy in its root system to survive the winter, and therefore those seeds likely perish, or those seedlings likely perish because of the conditions ahead. So the dormancy kind of inhibits germination just prior to those conditions. So that's kind of the strategy of seed dormancy, but there are different types of seed dormancies. And there are three main types that we're just going to describe to you today. One is physical dormancy. The second is physiological dormancy. And the third is morphological dormancy. Physical dormancy is that a seed with a seed coat that inhibits that seed from imbibing water, right? And so that seed can never take up enough water to initiate germination. And generally what needs to happen is that seed coat needs to wear down or be heated to a certain temperature so that it breaks down a little bit so water can enter the seed and the seed can initiate germination. So that is physical dormancy. And if we look at the table over here, there are a few examples where we can look at seeds. Here we have our koa seed, physically dormant, willy willy. Physically dormant. Physiological dormancy. Physiological dormancy is a type of dormancy that is physiological, or they require some physiological change or chemical input that's going to break dormancy. So I'm trying to think of, there are many examples of species that are physiologically dormant. But one example that I'd highlight is peely grass, right? I would imagine most people are familiar with this grass. And this grass exhibits a physiological dormancy that can be broken either by chemical inputs or by what we call stratification. And that's usually temperature stratification. So for peely grass, if we lower the moisture content of the seeds, so drive off the water from those seeds, and then store those seeds or place those seeds in a hot environment, so around 30 degrees centigrade, that over about a year or so, that dormancy will be alleviated by giving those conditions, right? So low moisture content, high temperatures. And then the seeds will germinate. But also those seeds will germinate if provided with the chemical components of smoke. So if we go into the store and buy liquid smoke and apply that to peely seeds, we can also see dormancy break take place. So then this brings us to morphological dormancy, and it's just morphology. It is usually a seed that has an undifferentiated embryo. That means those embryonic cells have not even differentiated themselves into embryonic cells yet, and they need time to do so. Or that embryo is so small and rudimentary that it needs time to grow before it was able to actually break through the seed coat and germinate. And morphophysiological dormancy is a combination of two. A seed that has physiological dormancy and a rudimentary or undifferentiated embryo. And we also then mentioned combinational dormancy, and that is usually the combination of two types of dormancy, physical and physiological. And an example, I believe, of that type of dormancy, in my understanding, would be the Zabutylon, where we clip it, but those seeds don't germinate in a certain amount of time, and they require more time to stratify, meaning being present in a certain temperature regime to break that dormancy. But today I'd like to show you a pretty sure bet in dormancy break for physical dormancy, and that we can show you that with some of the examples we have here on the table. And I think there are two things, and I'm just going to step and grab something over here, that we can use to break dormancy. One, we can physically wear down the seed coat to the point where it's going to allow the seed to imbibe water, and we can do that by sanding the seed. I like to put that seed in a little soil sieve with a little bit of a little firm soil sieve, and then you can run that sandpaper over those seeds until you start to notice the seed coat is wearing. And it's a bit of an art and not an exact science, because if we sand too hard, we might destroy the seed, and if we sand too little, we might not actually break the dormancy. So when we're doing this, I think we like to see a little bit of powder residue to accumulate on the bottom of our sieve, which would tell us that we are rubbing off some of that seed coat. Another way to break that dormancy is to clip it, and by simply clipping a hole in the seed coat to allow water in at that point. However, when clipping, we have to be a little bit careful about where we're clipping it, because if we clip the embryo, we've clipped its life. So this is a koa seed, and I don't know if we can see it great on camera, but we can see this little frilly thing on the end. That's a point of attachment to the fruit, which is a legume. And we generally want to clip on the opposite end of that to avoid clipping the embryo, which is located in that area. And the same goes for willy willy. Pull that out of there, we see where the point of attachment is. These seeds are easily, because they're big, they're easy to clip a bunch of them. So you can use clipping. And now here we have a little metal clip tool, which clips really nicely. But you could use a toenail clipper, a razor blade, scissors, whatever you can clip a little bit of hole in. And you want to clip it so that we're not cutting too much into the endosperm, but we're removing a section of the seed coat. That will allow that seed to imbibe. So we have sanding, clipping, and in some instances we can also use hot water treatments to break dormancy. That would be use your electric kettle, let it boil, and then in a glass jar fill it with hot water, put your seeds in. That can also be effective in breaking dormancy, or actually baking at higher temperatures can break dormancy of some seeds. Although I will express some caution when using those two approaches, because if your seeds aren't physically dormant or don't like those treatments, it is possible that you will kill those seeds in the process.
Hey, so Tim, we've got our first question here. Really exciting, and it's a pretty good one. It goes back to seed processing, and it is, what is the best way to extract mamaki seeds?
So to process mamaki, is that it? To clean it? Yep. So the best way to process mamaki is, we showed in the video the stair tread, or the blender. So if you're working with a lot of mamaki, we actually coat the blades of the blender, like I said, and tool dip. Sometimes you got to really paint that stuff on there. It's not just as easy as dipping it in and getting a full coverage of the blade. So we'll use the blender or either the stair tread to macerate that fruit. So kind of separating all the pulp from the seed. And then what we'll do is in like a Tupperware or some sort of bowl or something, add that mass of pulp and seeds into a bowl of water, add some water so the seeds and the pulp start to separate. And you can kind of see that in the water. And then you can kind of start sieving off the pulp from that water and leaving the seed there. And then in a pretty tight sieve, right, so you don't lose your seed, drain out all the seed and then drop it on, well, use paper towel, and that works pretty well, on something that you can dry it on. So find a dry spot in your house or the dry spot in your house, spread that seed that has been now sieved off over like a piece of paper towel, or maybe you want to use wax paper because it's not really going to stick to the wax paper, and let that seed dry out, and it's processed. So it's pretty quick. You can process thousands of mamaki seeds in literally less than 30 minutes by just really macerating and then using the water to kind of separate the pulp out from that seed. So.
Great, and Gigi, hopefully we'll have some time and I can upload a short video on mamaki processing because it is one of my favorite seeds to process. So with that, we will be moving on to our next segment, which is Germination Media. So we'll see if Nalani is ready to queue up. Oh, and it looks like we are.
So what kind of other medias can you use? Well, you can use a lot of different media to germinate seed. You could use sand. Sand is preferred by some people because it's very well drained. And some of the issues we have with germinating seeds is those seeds kind of rot out in place before they ever have a chance to germinate. And sand, drains its water away very quickly, but then you also have to be prepared to be able to give that medium more moisture so that moisture is available to seeds kind of consistently until they germinate. So sand is an option. Again, I wouldn't go to the beach. The beach sand probably has a lot of salts in it, and salts are probably not good for seed germination in general. But using a mason sand or something you might be able to purchase in Ace or Home Depot is likely a pretty neutral substance that, again, is well drained and can be a really functional media for germination. However, you do have to have constant inputs of moisture because that sandy soil is drying out often. So there are a couple other things, or 3 other things that I think are mainstays in horticulture. We have, well, ignore some of the perlite here. We have perlite here, which is nice, creates airspace in soil and creates drainage.
Sorry about that, guys. We're gonna queue up with the video.
I'm trying, guys. Sorry. Every video seems to be starting in a new way. So let's try this again. Okay, can you see my screen? Let's see if
We
it
can,
plays.
but it's not the
What kind of
video.
other medias?
So now the video is not playing again.
Yes.
Okay. Can we talk on it for a minute while I try to pull it up in another way?
How about this? Maybe we can just have Tim talk about Germination Media, and then we'll try and play the last video, because I think we can handle probably some media talks. How about that, Tim?
Yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds good. So in the video, I mean, you can use a lot of different things to germinate soil. Germinate seed. Try to talk about the best things. So you heard about the sand. So sand can be a functional one, but that's, again, you need to have, in some ways, a lot of time to add water back into there, because if your media dries out, your seeds don't have the moisture available to initiate germination. But sand is a really easy thing to work with, and partially is that it drains. And I mentioned on there that some of the issues with germination medias is that they just retain so much moisture, and that especially when seeds have dormancies that may require the seed to sit in the media for prolonged periods of time, and for them to go through the necessary conditions to initiate germination, that we can see seeds germinating. So germination media, I'm looking for 2 qualities: some moisture retention, but also some quality for drainage. So what we here have been using mostly is a mixture of peat moss and perlite primarily, and that kind of in a 1-to-1 mix of peat moss and perlite. Both things you can purchase in Home Depot or an Ace or a City Mill or whatever. They're always available. If you mix those to 1-to-1, that generally is a good germination media. Or you can buy things like Sunshine Grow Mix, which I think is commonly used here in Hawaii for propagation. That already has primarily peat moss, a little bit of vermiculite and perlite in it. But then take that and add, 1-to-1 perlite to that Sunshine mix is also a good way to go about it. And Sunshine also makes products for propagation of seeds, and they call them Germination Medias. And I've bought some here in Hawaii where I found that they just hold too much moisture. So we just cut it with perlite, put more perlite in there and add more drainage. And those things seem to work well. So a propagator here, or the greenhouse manager here, likes also top dress. So make that 1-to-1 perlite peat moss or 1-to-1 perlite to Sunshine mix, and then sow the seeds. And he likes to coat it with vermiculite. Now, vermiculite is another kind of substance used in soilless medias for in the nursery and greenhouse trades. It's a little bit different in perlite in that it absorbs a little bit of moisture, it holds moisture in the soil. And this way he likes to put a little top so that moisture is held right at that seed zone, but the rest of the media drains nicely because it's mixed with the perlite. And that's what we've been using. But people are using all sorts of stuff in germination. But I think, the big problem is really having a media that kind of is balanced in terms of, yes, holding moisture, but also driving off some of that moisture, especially when flats are sitting around for months on end, and as you're waiting for your dormant seeds to germinate.
Awesome. Thanks, Tim. And just a reminder, we will have these videos and the extended versions of the videos posted by next week. We are going to roll into video 6 here, which is seed collection. When should we collect seeds? So Melania, let's cue it up.
This brings me to seed collection. So when we're storing seed, it's very important that when we're collecting our seed, that we collect our seed at a mature state, right? Because that is when the seeds have developed their ability to tolerate stresses such as desiccation. And so we need to collect mature seed. So I want to show you what that means and how we can determine that when we're in the field or our garden collecting seed. So I brought a few examples out just to show mature or immature seed. And there are a few things we want to look at. So when we're looking at fleshy fruits, I think seed color is a great indicator. So if we look at the asimales here, we can see variable colors and sizes in fruit. Right here is a white fruit, and that's a fruit that indicates maturity, right? So we look for fruit colors of the fruit. We can look at the seed color, hardness, so if we take a seed out and it's very green and white and soft, it's likely immature versus a seed that is a darker color and very hard in texture. So right here, this green fruit for sure is very immature versus the white fruit. And then we look at the naupaka, it's very similar, right? We have a variety of fruits on this and fructescence, and we have a white fruit that we can indicate that's mature. Well, it's the color because we know, we've made enough observations to know that white is a color of maturity, but we can also feel those fruits, right? They're squishy, they're juicy versus these green ones that are hard, and pretty juiceless, right? So we can use just textures and things like that to determine it. So also we can look at, again, color of fruits. We look at Ko here. That green versus that brown dried color. That brown dried color is indicating certain maturity. And then when we were talking about Dehystem fruits, again, these fruits that have structures that basically dry out and eject fruits or allow fruits to be ejected from those things, we can look at things like some fruits, and definitely koa, we can shake them and hear seeds rattling inside. That's an indication that seeds are mature. And then again, just color of the fruit, because if this fruit were all green compared to this brown fruit, which we know is mature and has mature fruit, we can just basically use that as the indicator of maturity. Again, using those basic concepts, we can look at the hibiscus. Here's our green fruit, definitely, versus our open fruit, right? Our open capsule that is now allowing these seeds to disperse into nature. And so that's another thing, just the fact that seeds are already dispersing into nature is a good indicator that most of the seeds are mature. And we look at these, we have really dark seeds, which I can maybe show here. Versus if we rip this sucker open, you can see these white seeds that are very soft, right? I can almost squish them and break them with my finger, very green inside. So, again, the importance of maturity is that if we're going to have seed materials that are useful for propagation or going to tolerate some of those stressors like drying or desiccation that we use to store seeds for the long term, we need to have mature seed because those things have developed the abilities to both germinate and tolerate those things. And so mature seeds should be always the unit we're looking for when we're going for propagation.
Great. So, anybody else have any follow-up questions here while we got the expert on the line? We'll field it for a couple more. We'll bring Nalani back on as well. That's the end of our video recorded segment. Thank you guys for bearing with us. This is our first one in the webinar series. We have kinks to work out. I think that we're going to make our way there. Let's see. Tim, do you have anything to add?
Sure. So in that last section, I just again highlight the importance of working with mature seed when we're propagating or when we're looking to preserve these seeds for the long term, because that's at the point where we're going to be successful. That's when these seeds have developed, one, the ability to germinate, and two, the ability to tolerate desiccation, and then also, as a result, for those seeds that can be frozen, or will be tolerant of those negative temperatures as well. But you can propagate immature seeds, but it's because when the fruit is maturing or the seeds are maturing on the mother plant, it's developing the ability to germinate prior to the ability to tolerate certain stresses. So immature seeds can be propagated. But there's not really an exact science to understand when to collect it so that they're actually capable of germinating. So I don't necessarily recommend that, but it's an opportunity, and you can propagate immature seeds, just to keep in mind. But the surest bet is go with mature seed. And if what I think this last video didn't highlight so much, because we probably had to edit it down because I was very long-winded, most likely, is that storing seeds can be a very easy thing, right? And so if you have seeds that you have for, say, you own a piece of property and you collected some seeds because you're using them in your garden, or you have some kind of restorative actions happening on your property and you want to store some seeds for the long term, there's a couple things we want to do, and that is really cool our seeds and dry our seeds. And from the seed breeding perspective, where we're doing this kind of on a level to preserve multiple species that are endangered or something. So kind of this off-site storage and maintaining living collections via seed of this endangered plants are, huge strategies in their management. We are very specific about our targets, at what temperature we're drying, what relative humidity we're drying. But if you're just doing this in your home and you want some added benefit of storage, remember cool and dry. And there was this guy, Harrington, who came up with the rule of thumb, and that was for every 1% decrease, every 1% decrease in moisture content and every 10 degrees decrease in Fahrenheit, you're basically doubling your seed's lifespan in storage. So dry and cool. And if we're going to freeze seed, there's one thing we need to do, that is we need to remove enough water that seed is not going to be damaged from ice crystallization within the seed itself. So like if you took celery and dumped it in your freezer, you pulled it out the next day, it's going to be pretty limp. Same thing goes with seeds. So if we're going to freeze seeds, we need to dry them to about 12%, 13% moisture content. So we're not at risk of killing that seed through the negative temperature we're storing at. Or if you're just looking for midterm storage, don't even freeze them, just use your refrigerator to cool those seeds. And you can get great benefits in storage longevity just by doing so. And then when drying seeds, you can either dry seeds in an air-conditioned room in your home. That's generally a pretty dry place compared to kind of ambient relative humidities outside. Or you can use things like silica gels. Silica gels is the stuff you find in your pharmaceuticals in those little sachets or in your shoebox or whatever to keep the moisture down. Those silica gels have a high propensity to remove water from air. And you could just take one of those Tupperwares with one of the rubber gaskets on the top that's almost like airtight. And if you put a volume of 1:1 seed to silica gel in that Tupperware, you can just put the silica gel right on the bottom of the Tupperware, and then just in little coin envelopes, put your seed and leave them in there for about a week to 2 weeks. So large seeds, leave them in for a week, for 2 weeks, small seeds for 1 week. And your seeds are pretty dry, and then you can just put them in some sort of container that's pretty airtight and throw them in your fridge, and you're going to get great returns on longevity through time. So there's a whole spectrum of things to do to preserve your seed, but if you just think I can dry them and I can cool them, you're going to get added benefit seed storage.
Awesome. And we do have some extra videos as well, and those are going to be posted on the YouTube channel. I'll let Nalani explain on that.
Yeah, so we will have we'll have the recording from today and also the extended videos posted up on our YouTube channel by the end of the week. And we will also send that link out in our next newsletter, and I'm sure also on our social media before the next newsletter comes out as well. So continuing on in our series, we're going to have next month, we're going to be doing these on the second Saturday of every month. Next month, we'll be focusing on propagating by air layers. And then we've also got cuttings, grafting, air layer follow-up, and outplanting techniques. So those are all of our sessions through March. And if you guys are still with us right now, I do want to go ahead and I'm going to kind of stop my screen share right here. And I just wanted to close up with a poll. We opened with a poll, so I'm going to close with a poll here. And if you're still with us, go ahead and just answer those questions. And that's going to call it a day for us. So I really want to extend a big mahalo to Tim and the Oahu Army Natural Resources Program for allowing a camera, taking the time out of their day to be live with us right now, but also to have the camera in the facility, to Tim and Makanani for spending that time doing the videos. And of course to Jenna, our board member, for orchestrating all of this series for us. So thank you guys so much. Feel free to email me, nalani@huihawaii.org, if you've got any follow-up questions, and I can field them over to Tim. And again, thanks for bearing with us as I figure out how to be a good Zoom moderator.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Well, until next time, I guess. Thanks again, Tim.
See you.
Okay.